Okay, here's an odd one for you, as if my channel doesn't show enough little odd ideas and concepts. Here it goes with a theory that I had whenever I was younger. Just something simple came to mind. I'm always trying to find a way out of things. And whenever somebody would present me with something, I would always try to find a devil's advocate way out. And if I could, maybe that was valid and I could stand on both sides of the fences and go back and forth and find out which one was possibly more valid. Just one way of validation, if you will. But this is an allosaurus. I don't know if you're familiar with it. That thing better quit dinging real quick. I don't know if you're familiar with an allosaurus, but if you'll look, it's very much like a T-Rex. A little bit more lizard-like and not so steroided out. They get about 35, 40 foot long, but a lot of the ones that they found are juveniles in the 20, 25 foot range. They get about 20 foot tall whenever they stand up totally. Whenever they leer over like this, they're like 12 to 14 foot long. They could run along pretty fast. And in fact, whenever my brother and I were kids, he used to have a model that had one of these. In fact, it was a whole diorama that he didn't have the complete set for, but it was a few different dinosaurs. It had an ankylosaurus that looks very much like an armadillo with a spiky tail on it and so on. And there was a Neanderthal and then Cro-Magnon man and woman and a snake in a tree, very Adam and Eve-ish looking things. And there was a tar pit. And I always wanted to go to La Brea tar pits. Eventually was able to. We took a trip with my wife and so on. But that was very interesting too. But this Allosaurus, we always thought would be able to go a whole lot faster. And at that point in time, because it had changed a whole lot, they didn't really believe T-Rex could go that fast. And then they finally came up with the idea of his cadence and his walk, and that once he could get going real fast. So these were things that were a little more limber. Looking at a size comparison here, well, let's see if I can zoom out just a little bit and show you the people over here. There's a size comparison here of them. Now the one on the far right is the European version. And then the rest of them are actually found in North America predominantly. And I'll show you the range here in a little bit. I don't want to go too deep into it, but I just want to show you this dinosaur. This is something that was around in that Jurassic age. It's got horns over its eyes and stuff, so this is the one that they kind of built the other dinosaur out of Jurassic Park, where it had the horn over their eyes, but that's really a carnosaur. But it's under the same guise or same family and group versus size, if you will. But this just gives you a size comparison. The idea they're over in Europe too is shows you an odd thing where they know that it's not convergence, and then it's the same creature, yet this must have come from a time before in the Pangea effect and all of those ideas, because there really wouldn't have been a land bridge, and dinosaurs aren't possible if walking across ice age tundra and go across and stuff. It doesn't really make sense. They're supposedly cold-blooded creatures and all that stuff, but then again they were saying that they can't see if you don't move and all of those ideas that really aren't true. So let's just look at a few pictures of these. There's a giant skeleton of one that's up, and again person comes up to their knee and hip, and here again they are with the little horns that they have above them, and they say that that's supposed to be a mating thing. Perhaps males had larger ones than females. Males would be colored up more. They have no idea of color. They thought they were going way out on a limb and giving this guy a zebra striped tail. But now we know that they could have had spots or false eye spots on their body, like target marks or word stripes all over their body and stuff. And I could be on my video game right now called Ark, where we have different animals like these that you can throw out and stuff, so you can get all these dinosaurs. We've really gone through time with these things, and now they've got robot or tech forms of them, but I didn't want to necessarily do that or go too deep in it. But you can see the claws and the hand here of this creature, and it's very velociraptor-ish, but not quite as hooked as you know you can see here, but could really tear something up badly. And each one of these claws, well, that first finger claw there is like a foot long. The other one's a little bit less, and the other one's next is a little bit less. And here's the scene of one scavenging on an apatosaurus, like the one that's in the background here. So they could have run around, and they're fierce creatures, right? Here's a little recreation of that in a drawing type idea. Now it's tearing one up, and again you can see the one in the distance there standing up straight and getting over 20 foot tall easy. But then again, whenever they run, they leer forward and lurch, supposedly like they show in here, and so it's very much like we see the velociraptors run. Now the thing that you know about these guys is that they're from 185 to 150 million years ago, right? And they died off, though, because they have forms of these that they have from around that time, but they really don't have any from right around up to 65 million years ago, whenever all the dinosaurs died off. But they believe that they kind of carried on till then, but then this is one of the ones they go, well, it might have died off before then, right? Allosaurus, right? So, and this is his look. So this is a T-Rex type thing, right? I mean, there's no question of what we're looking at here. You know, one of the first forms of this was found, let me go back one here. When the first forms of this was found, these people thought they were finding petrified cow hooves on their property. And they had him come look at it, and he realized he was looking at part of the tail vertebrae. And so that's what that was. Here's another bone that's been found and so on, and they've pieced together dinosaurs like they do in different variations. And there's a huge one which tells you how big they can get, and a big male, and this is Big Al. They have another one that has one of his horns bit off. Probably that was males fighting with each other. Something happens here, and so the little horn that you saw there got bit off. This little form right here is like a different variation on a theme called Novanator, and it had a brachial ridge here across its nose. Megaraptor, like a gigantic raptor. More form was like this, but it doesn't have that claw that we're all famous for on them. So I'm going to unplug this. Hopefully I have enough to last through all of the idea here. So you can see one of these things tearing things up, right? Here's variations on a theme of these guys, and of course they could have been much more colored like this. If you want to see some weird colored ones, you ought to see my video game. And this is Gigantosaurus carolina. So this is a Carolinian type form that you find from there and even into Argentina. So all of that connects, and a lot of those dinosaurs connect and stuff, and the brontosaurs and all those that people had from way back when, right? And so here's a diorama of like the youngest one at the bottom left, and a medium size, and then an adult, and they all seem to be attacking some larger dinosaur that's here in the Natural History Museum. There's another form and a recreation. So one thing I remember seeing is one of these type guys fighting like King Kong and stuff, and they had found one with a stegosaur, and they believed that one variation of these might have had blades on his back like stegosaurs have on their back, and that was supposed to have led to the idea of Godzilla. But in turn now they found that they were attacking these guys, and that's not a blade from their body or anything either in any way. And that what we're seeing here is a stegosaur baby and mama. being attacked, and she's trying to protect her kid there, but she's got to watch out. Well, what have they found from this? Well, here's a stegosaur mouth. Pardon your finger of God here. But you can see this blade, and it's got a perfect notch out of it that's cut that matches that to a T. This notch matches the mouth perfectly of an actual recreation of an allosaur mouth. So that's stegosaurs too. So they're around then and everything, and here's the maximum that's one could have gaped its mouth and so on. So we've got a good idea what we're talking about, right? Rawr. And they found certain bones from different ones and put it together and made full ones and so on. Here they are attacking a Jurassic Park type creature. And this is what I was waiting to go to before I went to the next concept, is that here's where they're found, from Montana and Wyoming, where a lot of dinosaurs are of course found in those special little areas that they found them in, trapped, but all the way down through Colorado and New Mexico and almost into Texas there at the bottom, right? So quite a range, but then you'll find that the ones over in Carolina are a little different and the other ones a little different and so on, and they have overlappings. And again, I believe a lot of this is real closely related in hybridization and so on. So let's look at something else here. Y'all are familiar with that, but are you familiar with hadrasaurs? Hadrasaurs hadros means stout or thick in Greek, so Latin. But they're the duck-billed dinosaurs, so you get this effect that looks like that. You're familiar with these guys, right? Jurassic Park and ideas where they have these duck-billed concepts, and they used to believe some of them were aquatic and all of this, right? And there's a little bit of a variation on a theme. Well, hadrosaurs are found through Texas, actually, believe it or not. And so you're familiar with a duck-billed. Some of these have crests on their heads and so on. They found these through Texas, and in fact, I used to have a little part of a hip bone that I found in the Sulphur River looking for dinosaur bones and shark teeth. And it used to be what held my dish because of the curve of it. It just held onto a dish perfectly for an iguana that I had. It was an El Salvadoran iguana. He was pretty much the closest thing I could get to a dinosaur at the time. So I don't know how into dinosaurs you ever were, but these are things that were living all through the Jurassic time, and so this would have been food for the other one and so on, and they've gone through that, and you're probably well familiar with what I'm talking about and this concept and these different guys that are hadrosaurs. And I don't want to have to find it here, but they're going to tell you that they found in 1854 and in a lignite coal deposit. So you see what we're talking about, right? And well, I was looking for where they die off at. But so they've classified them in all these dinosaurs, and everything that we're looking at on this page all died off. In fact, all those guys died off, and they all turned into chickens and birds, right? And that took gazillions of years, but also a definite big thing that happened whenever a meteor hit our planet, right? We all know this concept, right? Let me cut to the chase instead of going to the third thing I was going to show you there real quick. But I might go to it here later, for I have a fourth and a fifth. But this is the thing that's like, okay, what? So we know about Carbon-14, right? You're familiar with Carbon-14, like Carbon-14 dating, if you will. Well, the funny thing about if you look up carbon-14 dating in dinosaur bones, you get some weird things going on all of a sudden. Now, carbon-14, the way I understand it, has a half-life of 5,720 years or something like that. So, well, here it is. Here's exactly what I'm fixing to say. Carbon-14 has a half-life of 5,730 years, almost like a mile, and would decay to an undetectable levels in under 100,000 years. By looking at half-lives and then quarter and working your way down, it would disintegrate to about nothing in 100,000 years, right? This is the reason that they say carbon dating is really only valid to about 50,000 years, and even then it starts to be off, possibly by 5,000 years, which means a lot. I mean, it's 10% of the number. And then after that point, it could get off more, because it might decay away at different points and stuff like that, and they just don't, so we've come up with a lot of other ways to validate ages on stuff, like that spectroscopy that works off of light and when the last time that it saw light and stuff. Some real incredible scientific endeavors in that. But we're talking about carbon-14. This is the thing that dated everything, and it's the calibration for everything, and so that would kind of make something important if this was off by a little bit, wouldn't it? Well, why is carbon-14 found in dinosaur fossils that evolutionists say are over 60 million years old and died off? Think about that. Perhaps the fossils are much younger than they assume. That's just one way of looking at it. Now, in this person, they actually try to quote Bible verses, which I believe were talking about Leviathan and Behemoth and stuff, and look how he created these big creatures that have a trunk like a tree tail and so on. And people a long time ago figured out this was more like hippos and rhinos. They were talking about the unicorn in the Bible, so on. I have videos about all that. But this thing hit me kind of weird and odd. Let me close that and get to another picture here, because we're going to be able to look at something. Perhaps you've seen this idea that they have, that they have actually found live tissue and blood cells in some different dinosaur in these T-Rexes. In fact, I remember like 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago at least, sometime around in there, hearing about how they had found dinosaur bones and that they seemed fresh to these people, that they stank like they were picking out a dead body in a way, something that hadn't been there for long enough to go through its full ossification process and so on. And that people started looking at this and they found something that looked like a clot, and they looked at it under a microscope and it had blood cells in it that had a nucleus in them and so on, and they were like, oh my gosh, there's still blood cells. And then looking around, they even found veins and some blood cells in those veins and so on, like you're seeing up in here. And that's not supposed to be here anymore for something that's 16, I mean, it's permineralized or whatever, and turns basically into minerals by that time, doesn't it? Doesn't it? Okay, well, what I don't understand, and there may be some simple idea off of the idea or concept here, for what I was sent, and from one of my videos before where I talked about dinosaurs and this, that, and the other, and somebody said, well, I know this is out of your range, but hey, you're talking about it. So here's one thing that's like what I was looking at, but I was looking at a different scale, which I'll be able to find in a minute probably. But now we're finding this hadrasaurs, right? And Edmontosaurus and ceratopsian, which I could show you, but ceratopsian is basically like a triceratops. Like what we all believe that maybe the idea came from, that they give the idea of a griffin. But probably they were looking at dinosaur bones that had been uncovered somewhere, and then they came up with that idea, right? Let me get in a little closer here on it. And these things that are supposed to date back to 65 million years ago and be gone shortly after, date years before present, radiocarbon date, Edmontosaurus to 25,000 to 32,000 BC, and hadrasaurs at 28 and 20 and 32, and ceratopsids at 26 and 36,000 years ago. Are you seeing this? It's not some silly multiplier. This on the outside is a plus or minus 130 years. This is a well-dated system going on here. What's weird is, this is from Lance, from Hell Creek, from Horseshoe Canyon, where they found these all at. They're dating from this date. Now that's not thousands, or I'm sorry, that's not millions. That was thousands. Here's a picture of those blood cells in actually veins that are still visible in a dinosaur fossil. It's by Brian Thomas, a PhD, back in 2015. So people have been finding this going on. I watched a video by a lady, blonde-haired lady, pretty decent looking, getting about 40 or something, I don't know. And she was talking about whenever she had found it. And then there's another video where her having a talk about it. And there's another one where she's actually having an interview about it, which I believe became for the talk by the way everything looks. So that's a ceratopsid right there. Triceratops, when it has the 3 prongs. Cera's prongs are horns. Tri is 3. Very closely related. Interestingly, here's an Anasazi Indian carving that looks much more like a brontosaurus than something with a long neck, and it's not a snake because it's got legs on it. But so questions start coming all of a sudden, because here's the one that I was looking at. They sent me from the Research Science Institute, and it's showing an acropsid, and then hadrasaurs, triceratops, more hadrasaurs, more apatosaurus. No, this is not the same one. I'm sorry. This is different. It started out the same, but there's no allosaurus on this list, so we'll have to look for that too. 32, 25, 23, 29, 30, 31, 36,000 years ago. 24, 39, 30, 22. I know there's a weird one here. It shows up 1900 years ago. But they feel it's been contaminated. See, it says contaminated on it. 25, 25, 23, 26, 2,500 contaminated, 37, 38,000 years ago, apatosaurus. So not only were the dinosaurs, but their food we're living on for that a cropsid would be eating them, but I'd have to show you allosaurus that we were starting off with so I could finish this off correctly. Oh, and it looks like that same similar list. This is a different one. Maybe it's, oh wow, you can't even read that. No. So 65 million year old fossils are reading out to being under 30,000 years old quite often. Is this the reason that there are dragon stories and so on, that people were running into remnants of these not too long ago? Where is the one? Oh, here's some of this. Let me try to get a zoom on it. Here's some of this dinosaur they found. Look, this live tissue sample here. You can see blood in it and everything, just with your naked eyes. So then they zoom in on it, and all these little dots that are going on here, there's some capillaries in it with blood in it, and there's cells that are in that blood from on this tissue, and there's live tissue and tendons still and everything, biological material, so on. Now, when I first heard about this, I thought, well, maybe they somehow got swamped over in just the right peat bog situation to where they got smothered, and in doing so, it kept them just right. But guys, that would extend it, some, but it wouldn't get something 65 million years old to still have blood and meat on it. There's no way. I mean, long ago, before you reach 1,000,000 years, there's nothing left but bones, and then they're turning. And if they turn right, you end up later being able to find some of them. Before that process, the whole dinosaur can be there, and if it doesn't go through that process right, you may only find parts of it. Part of it might get exposed, and you'll never find the tail, you'll never find the head, you'll never find whatever. So this idea had creationists going crazy on the idea, but creationists in the Bible have to deal with 6,000 years, and that's not going to fit any of this, even if radiocarbon dating's off and so on. Now, I used to have this idea when I was a kid, though, that perhaps radiocarbon dating was off, and if radiocarbon dating was off, this was during talks with my brother and so on, and of course he's the deacon of a church now. He has a total different view on the age of the world and stuff, but there's dinosaur tracks here in America. Here, this has a couple of 3-part screw over, and I may want to make a separate video out and show you all of this. Some people are unaware of it, some of you may have seen it. There's a place called Glen Rose, Texas, and right down through there in a creek bed, they found dinosaur tracks that look like this that are running through there. And it looked like one dinosaur was chasing another somewhat, or something. But they run down through the creek bed, but in that same mud and that same level, it looks like, well, it doesn't look like there are, whether it may be in the exact same level or not, human footprints that are running through that, crisscrossing, and there are even points where they are directly touching them and so on. In fact, this picture here, you can see where a foot at the very top of it had gone, and then you can tell that the foot had gone, but then the heavier dinosaur had stepped on where the foot was. That's the only way that works out. So not only is this, what they try to tell you in Glen Rose is that a thin layer of mud got deposited over them, and then people ran through it again during the time of man. So it was just almost exposed right then anyhow, and they ran through it again and left footprints, but right then it bisqued over, and then it became the same type of rock, and that's the reason it looks the same. See, the reason they have an issue with that too is because that also is telling you that they were running through there at a couple of 100,000 years ago to be made to turn into stone. During our current understanding of geology and the way it would work, and sandstone turning into it off a creek bed and turning into the form and the solid rock, which like this is. You can tell this is kind of a sedimentary rock, but it's got the whole prints into it. There are a lot of them. I think it was over 40 in one trail that's running through there, and they found another trail running through another part of it. A whole nother spot. People tried to say they were fake, and this guy that was all church freak out, he ran out there in the middle of the night and tried to take a chisel or jackhammer things and destroy them. But luckily there's so many of them he couldn't do it. But he ruined quite a few of them, and the ones that show footprints. But there's a lot of pictures of it, like this one here. Now, I probably ought to do a separate video on this concept. You know, when I was a kid, I watched that Land of the Lost, and I made a video about that earlier in the year, and that's whenever I got this first information on this. But then whenever I got sent the other part, I started looking up every once in a while on it, because it keeps hitting me with this, what? I try to talk about carbon dating all the time, and I end up finding myself going, well, you know, is it right? I know it's got to be close within this first 10,000 years, but after that, how far can it be off? How can they find carbon or C14 in dinosaurs in the first place if it only lasts 100,000 years? Am I missing something? If they carbon date them and they're reading under 40,000 down to 20,000 BC, what is that supposed to tell us? Now, I've heard a couple of people make apologies on this, just like I have Bible things or whatever, and a couple of them seem to carry about as much weight as nothing. A couple of them sound like, you're just, that sounds least likely. Give me your idea down there. The one idea that only fits is if there's some way, especially, that mammals and their bones would not have that same scale that everything else does. But the way I understand it, by looking up and just hearing on it, that they can date bones back, but then they lose it at about 50,000 years, and they don't like the reliability after that, Is that changed? I've also heard that now they're reliable up to nearly 100,000 years because they have, with the other methods, calibrated it back, and so even though it gives you a wider date, they still feel more confident in these elder numbers. Is that really in effect? Glen Rose has dinosaur bones, dinosaur tracks all over it. I went there and I saw them myself. They've got a whole dinosaur track pack thing that you can go on, and these walking trails that go along with it, and it's pretty wicked. So is remnants of this giant lizards and so on, where we get this idea. You know, they found this mammoth, and they say the carbon dating's inaccurate on it, but so they have to do more testing. But lo and behold, they've got a carbon dating on a mammoth baby here that was frozen solid. I believe it's supposed to date back to like 30,000 years. They found impressions of where they died, and because the land didn't get moved or disheveled too much, pieces of their skin. And so you can see here, skin. It's how we know that they really had that lizard skin, and some of them had that alligatory kind of skin on them. Yet other ones, it's how we know that they did have some feathers on them. And in that game I play, they got feathers on a lot of them now that they didn't before, and other ones they still keep lizardly because there's ones they believe are lizardish and so on, and ones that were more on that chicken type ideal. I know people think that looks like a stegosaurus in India and so on. Other people think this is supposed to be a hippo with a background that's just round rocks, like maybe Stonehenge. So amazing to think that we're of this date. I swear I didn't have to go this far down to find that originally. Pardon me, pardon your eyes as I go back up rapidly. But, oh, you're going to do that to me? Boy, now it's got stuck on it. Pardon me, guys. So this scale, which looked just like those other scales because it's an academic thing showing you these carbon dates on it, the one that I was familiar with showed somebody having found them from the University of Texas, and his dating that went along with it. Did it just flop like that? That's just... because I want to show you that allosaurus idea. I mean, you could say, okay, well, this guy and that guy, and well, what would he eat and all that, maybe even out of the ideas. Well, they're saying all these guys show up to be that date, so are they all screwed up? Or are they all somewhat more correct? And when we go back, is that number correct? Is our idea or even concept of radiocarbon dating really that valid? Does it really decay at those rates? Well, we seem to have found out it does. Wow, this thing's getting stuck. Okay, well, here's one of them. And it looks like it may have some of the same information. Where are we at here? 38, okay. So here's the acros, but here's the allosaurus. 31,360. It's overlapping all these dates, and a lot of those are hadrasaurs and triceratops. And hadrasaurs out the butt. And apatosaurus again, too. So when they showed they're eating them and everything, bow, bow, bow. The only problem that I'm having here is, see, well, I find some of them in Texas here, and then Colorado, and the allosaurus was found in the edge of Colorado, but Arkansas, and then back in Montana, where a lot of these guys in triceratops skulls are found in there and stuff. But look at this dating through here. 39,000 is the oldest date on this whole run. And the earliest date on this run I see is 22,380, give or take 800 years. I can understand how it might be off 800 years if we're looking back 23,000 years ago, and that you'd have to give it that type of range. What I can't understand is that there are triceratops, hadrasaurs, apatosaurs, Back grows an allosaurus. Apparently alive, or we're this old. Am I missing something, people? I've got about 6 pokers in the fire right now and didn't really have time for this. And this is no excuse in any way, shape, or form, but I didn't want to take and push everything over to one side on the fondue pot and start working with something else real quick here. But going down a rabbit hole, what are your thoughts on this? Maybe look up on it what I've just done here and what they show, and see if you can find something that validates the situation and says, oh, all those numbers are off by so and so, and that all of this live tissue that they have found on dinosaurs, which this looks like live tissue they may find on like a mummy or something, or Otzi the Iceman or something like that. That doesn't look, you can still see blood inside the vein. It doesn't look, here's cells itself, maybe white blood cells. It doesn't look like it's been overtaken or even had the time to be overtaken by the processes. Now, we do find dinosaur bones that are totally in that same area, have totally been taken over by the process. You follow me, right? So, I'm confused, and I don't like being in that position. Here's something that tells you, I mean, I've read a lot of these things, and the look of it all. This is how we found feathered dinosaurs. This is that Archaeopteryx. This is that lizard that's feathered. Short-lived carbon-14 found in all tested dinosaur bones. 521 year half-life of DNA, helping date dinosaur fossils containing dinosaur genetic material, or saurian genetic material. Egyptian mummy research that establishes 10,000 years as maximum for how long original biological molecules could possibly survive. And that's, of course, in the desert, and it might work different if things are done in different ways, but aren't we glad that the Egyptians did preserve themselves in such a way, like beef jerky in a way, but that did make it to where we can verify them at a much later date, rather than trying to get special bones up inside a person's head, or hope you can get DNA material out of the inside of a bone, which they've actually been able to do back to 30,000 years now successfully with Cro-Magnon man, and they're confident in that idea, and a few others back dating before that. And now that they've got that method going on, that's pretty exciting. But confusion. How old is dinosaurs that look like this? Did man ever see one that looked like this? Those people that apparently were living in North America at least 30,000 years ago, running through hadrasaur tracks. Oh wait, 22,000 hadrasaur tracks. So that's the Lutrians. Is that what that is? And whenever they first came over here, were there more creatures? Was this the land of the lost? There's a bunch of things that come to mind that are possibilities here. The one thing that doesn't come to a possibility, which is what looks like is the reality of what they're trying to show us, is that that DNA or that dinosaur material is much, much younger. We're finding that much, much younger effect too. I spent the first few years of this new channel over here